It is the Endo meeting on Wednesday, February 26th. And we're going to talk about Hermes today. Leo brings questions, I believe, pertaining to our perennial favorite topic of what constitutes a breaking change pragmatically, and which kind of pragmatic do we care about? So go ahead, Leo. What do we need to break? Who's going to suffer? And how does that inform the decision of whether to increment the major version or not?
Sure. I'll go ahead and share screen so the breaking change is a lockdown option that we're introducing. So I'll go ahead and just briefly show what that is. So it's going to be, and we think this is a good name. So one called host evaluators, and it will have three options. The default will be all evaluators are allowed. And then here's the breaking change. So now, if you want to run under content security policy, we're saying that you need to explicitly set this to none. Whereas previously, it's just been working because of this try catch we have. So yeah, on the left is how it's currently. If you're running under content security policy, it's basically just setting allowed to true, whereas we're saying now, yeah, explicitly say content security policy is none. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be treated and you run into the error. And then, yeah, we have a third one as well, which is for Hermes. But yeah, this is the breaking change that we're discussing, because once we introduce this, then previous people running lockdown are not going to have this option present. And yeah,
Okay.
going to run into this error.
Let's bring also some context of why we're even looking into it. So the nice thing about the whole endeavor is that we took assert direct eval, and instead of asserting direct eval and then silently pretending everything is fine under content security policy, we created a version of assert direct eval that's going to assert that expectations are met. So by default, and under any other circumstances we're going to throw. Then there's the option of no evaluators. And if you're setting that option, and then assert direct eval is going to detect that actually evaluators, as in at least new function, the Pharaoh function constructor, is actually working, we're going to throw an error. And then third option is for Hermes, where we set it to no direct. And we also assert that specifically this is happening, that evaluators partially work, but direct eval is not available. And so that means if we want to verify the assumptions every time the assumptions are set, we would require the users who used to use SES under content security policy, and the check would silently just skip over. We would require them to explicitly set the option in the new SES version. And what I wanted to discuss is whether we want to do it or we want to introduce some sort of ugly backwards compatibility that we didn't come up with yet when we worked on that with Leo.
Okay. I know everything I need to know. I think that we should implement an ugly backwards compatibility, that the default mode should continue to allow all existing usage to work, with a warning that you should make your position explicit on whether you wish evaluators to be available or not, so that existing users have a window in which they will see a warning and be able to update their code to make explicit the make their host evaluators option explicit to be either strict or sloppy, if you will, where it's currently sloppy. Such that by the time we have an opportunity and a need to clean up by introducing a breaking version of SES, it can be on the list of things that we get rid of when we change the default from sloppy to strict. Does that sound good?
So to summarize, we would accept a fourth option for the value, which would be undefined on host evaluators. And with undefined on host evaluators, we would not throw an error. Is that correct?
We would emit a warning that explicitly says, please add a host evaluators lockdown option to make explicit whether you want or do not want eval behavior at runtime.
Cool.
Okay. Are these warnings under the same umbrella as the warnings around removing unrecognized intrinsics? Are they configurably hidden in some cases?
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, if you have Leo, have you seen the reporters change?
No. But I'm just passing in the warn here so that we're able to use the reporters from before. But yeah, what's the change that's happened recently? I haven't.
Recent is a bit of an exaggeration. Recent is in some of the most recent changes to SES, specifically re-architected how the report introduced the idea of a reporter as an abstraction over the console.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So then yeah, the warning, I'm just using warn, which comes from the reporter, and then using that to warn. So yeah, already using that if this is the new one.
Yeah, sounds good. Which means that the warning would appear in an option group if it is emitted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That should, assuming that the reporter wasn't set to none, which is the configuration option that ZB alludes to for silencing warnings.
True. Yeah.
Okay. Is that satisfying? I think you should keep the refactor that makes it so that whether evaluators are enabled or not is explicitly marked. But just add an explicit check. It's like, hey, if you're in the default case, we're going to turn this into a warning instead of an exception.
Yeah, we're going to have to back out from the pretty switch case probably because of that. Or maybe not. I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah, it's working in the switch case already. I just plugged in the warn and yeah. But I did have a second thought. So if none of these cases are reached at the moment, we throw type error. But instead of putting all these assertions here, I thought it might be better to just put them where we fail at the moment in lockdown. So if I just open up lockdown, we have a bunch of failures. So I thought our current assertions may actually be better suited in this.
When validating the tag, when validating the union. Yeah, I agree. You can eliminate the possibility of an invalid element in the union. That being said, defense in depth, like if you making explicit that this is an unreachable case makes it easier to review.
Yeah, because all these failures happen first, and then that's when we actually reach assert direct eval. So yeah, all of these cases are going to fail before we reach them.
Okay.
Question?
As a matter of style, I personally have still ingrained from the JS lint days. No, does anybody remember JS? I mean, I know Richard remembers JS lint.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
Richie?
called out, but yes.
Um, yeah, Doug long ago decreed that there shall be no switch blocks because they have been deemed confusing. And I have not adjusted my opinion on that since. Should I have? Are switch blocks still taboo in 2025, or has everybody caught up and fine with being careful about break and having tooling that prevents you that warns you when you're about to run afoul of switch block foibles?
So I find that in the era of ES, lint, and prettier, that switch blocks only make sense when you've got fall through cases. Because otherwise you're just wasting vertical space.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
horizontal.
that's kind of true. On the other hand, switch case is not complex or confusing in comparison to what we've introduced and started doing since. That's my take on switch case. But
For example,
pretty much everything that you're supposed to do to write a React component.
I don't inflict these pains on myself. Can you be more explicit?
So there's a lot of more magic involved in React hooks or previously higher order components that you can easily get wrong. And all of the asynchronous reasoning about everything that's going on in there is just the trouble of forgetting to break pales in comparison.
Okay.
But I don't mind removing the switch case, especially for the sake of being able to give better error messages that are more explicit around what you're supposed to be doing.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that in 2025, the you must be this tall to play is higher, and the folks that would have been confused by switch blocks have already been eliminated from the game. Okay. Meh. Let's not, yeah. Okay. Let's not use a switch block.
Yeah.
Right? Fine with that.
Like, yeah.
If that's the main pushback we're getting for the feature, I'm fine.
No, the main pushback you're getting on the feature is that we should not make a breaking change yet, but we should plan to make a breaking change and signal that we intend to make a breaking change now so that people can adjust their behavior so that when we make a breaking change that it doesn't actually break anyone. That's my position.
Okay, that's good. Next topic.
And to be clear, we want to do that maybe this year. We may flush our debts this year. I'm not sure I can promise that, but I know I have created debts last year. I created debts last year in the by changing the compartment constructor conventional calling. That now I am recommending that every compartment can be constructed with a Dunderbar options, Dunderbar true option, in the expectation that if you do that now, when we converge with excess native compartments, you won't have to change any code. And eventually the sesshim can remove, in a breaking change, I can make it so that the sesshim ignores the Dunderbar option. And then after the next major version becomes commonplace, we would be able to remove all of that noise. Same with Dunderbar no namespace box. Dynamic import is going to return a promise for a namespace and not a boxed namespace. That's the direction that things are headed. And those are options that I think are going to be needed for most compartment constructors until the next major version. And we may as well start writing those temporary scars now so that we have an easier time when we cut a major version. Does that make sense?
Sounds fine to me.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any further topics?
I was going to ask, so at the moment, regarding compartments and constructing them, our compartments.evaluate, I noticed that there's safe evaluate happening by default, and we don't have eval taming on when we're constructing compartments. So yeah, under Hermes, we need unsafe eval, but then compartments are still going to call safe evaluate by default, which is an issue. So I was going to ask, do we want to introduce eval taming to compartments? Because yeah, I spotted a to-do by Jackworks, I think 3 years ago. That yeah,
I might need, I think I need more. I mean, I need more context. Safe evaluate is our, remind me, the safe evaluate is the,
calling the with statement. Yeah.
yeah, it's our, okay. So under
Yes.
what circumstances would we not use that?
Yeah. So if we say eval taming is unsafe evaluate, then ideally constructing compartments would also call unsafe eval if compartments are not going to break on Hermes. But at the moment, from what I see in the source code, we're calling safe evaluate by default on all compartment.evaluates. So
What would unsafe evaluate do?
uh so it
Wait,
would
what
not
is unsafe evaluate?
just run um the the eval that's not being tamed with the with statement. So just let it run. And
Oh,
yeah,
well, if that's the case, why would you use compartment.evaluate?
um,
Yeah, I think that we are mixed up on this one. So where we want the untamed eval to possibly be available is in the implementations of intrinsics. So the global function and the eval that exists after we finish locking down
In the start
would
compartment?
be, yeah, in the start compartment would be still working. But
Yeah.
about compartment evaluate, that's a different topic we wanted to discuss, whether we would, in case where we don't want to allow everything, but we do want to have the ability to construct compartments for the sake of having a global this that's nicely arranged, which we do in the bundling cases. What do we want to do about the evaluation around the compartment situation? So if you create a compartment where evaluation is impossible, do we want to hide some features? Do we want to throw when we attempt to use them? That was the exploration we wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that the answer is throw when someone attempts to use them.
And specifically in the case of Hermes, we don't have direct eval, but we do want to potentially tame things. So I was wondering if we could tame the global capital F function, and maybe eval, I'm not sure, using the Pharaoh function and the trick with arguments, listing all of the possible globals as the function's arguments and then not passing them if we didn't want to. Then the question is, if we create a compartment, would it be possible to have a functional function constructor inside of the compartment?
That, well, what assumptions are we making? So the function can using a function constructor uh instead of using indirect eval and with blocks or direct eval with blocks, what are you how are you building the list of masked global lexicals? By so I believe the old Kaha trick that I think Mike Samuel came up with, and please someone remind me who it actually um, was to use a regular expression to heuristically tokenize the source string to construct a list of every possibly uttered identifier in the source and injecting them as arguments in the lexical scope. Is that the technique that you're considering?
Something similar. I remember presenting it a while back as an experiment that could potentially work under Hermes. So the idea was to list all of the fields on global this and use that list instead of trying to derive a smaller list from the source code.
Right, which, yeah, okay. So that that technique presumes a frozen global, a frozen global in the start compartment, right?
Yes, or it presumes that we're not ready to provide fully capable lava mode under Hermes, but we want to do something.
or at least maybe not frozen, but non-extensible global.
Yeah. Yeah, which happens to be possible only under Hermes. Like you can prevent extensions on global only in Hermes out of engines we tried.
I love it.
Well, you have a then at least you have a pretty easy way to detect whether the strategy is viable at runtime.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if we want to figure out a mechanism to allow injecting that strategy or that implementation into SES, or do we want it built in, or do we want it built in only in the Hermes build? That's the options.
Does anybody feel that SES might be already pretty complicated?
Sounds pretty specific, I was going to say. So maybe just the Hermes. But...
Yeah, I don't know. The accommodation comes with the accommodating Hermes. This specifically comes with the risks for for the um for the integrity of SES on non-Hermes platforms. But uh yeah, if it's a lock, if so imagining this as a lockdown is I solemnly swear I'm using Hermes, and also if in the presence of the I solemnly swear I'm using Hermes, it checks to see whether your global is whether it can successfully make the global non-extensible, then lockdown would proceed to make it non-extensible and provide this alternate implementation of the reactor core of SES. And then presumably we have a bit of code inside of, presumably this adds a little bit of code where safe evaluator is, that instead of using safe evaluator, we use safe evaluator, but only on Hermes, as an alternate implementation of that.
At this point, I regret diving this deep into it because it's further in the future. So maybe let's wrap this up temporarily and go back to our more top-level topics.
So in summary, I am coming around to the idea that this complication might not be that invasive or risky, but yeah, we should revisit it. What's your TLDR, Richard? Your summary, feeling, instinct?
For what?
A safe evaluator, but only for Hermes as a feature, potentially.
I mean, I admit I have not done a review of the implementing code, but in terms of the functionality and the discussions that we've had, I mean, unless it makes things unmaintainable, it seems good to me.
Okay. All right. ZB, we're walk back. What's on the stack?
Yeah, so one quick thing is it would be nice to go through the motions of whatever is necessary to finish the pull request around building and testing the Hermes version of SES, which is one longer standing PR. Like if we could figure out what's preventing it from getting merged and get it merged would be nice, because there's a recent change in SES that breaks under Hermes, and it was not spotted because of testing only being on that PR. So it would be nice to have it on the main branch, so we would know when we're introducing stuff that breaks under Hermes. It's a tiny little breakage, but it would have been noticed with the test being in place.
Let me see what the holdup is. It is almost certainly just me not getting this far down my backlog.
2334. So yeah, I've been testing this against 2334 as well.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Yes. The holdup is that you are number 13. You are number 13 on my list of things to come back to. So just to say, it's just me not getting through my backlog regularly that's holding you up.
So hopefully we're gonna rebase and fix the small broken bit before you get to it, and it's gonna be ready for merging.
All right.
Unless you recall something to be extracted from it into a separate thing to speed up the main thing, then let us know. But in any case, let's merge the part that has a test for Hermes version working under Hermes.
Dump and dump. All right. All right. I have promoted you to the top of the backlog. I will try to get to it.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Chris, one thing if that conversation's over, I just wanted to mention, so 2 weeks ago, we spoke about potential handoff of the subpath pattern exports issue.
Mm-hmm.
So last week, it was Leo, ZB, and I think Kumavis joined. But at the time in which we spoke about this, it seemed as though that this was no longer needed, or it was the parties that needed it.
Every yeah, the feature is a great first issue because it is not on the critical path. It is not on anyone's critical path. Everyone has found a workaround. MetaMask found a workaround, and Agoric also has a workaround. But the lack of this feature is, I like to call it, analogous. Yeah. Sword of Damocles isn't quite the right metaphor. Are you familiar with Sword of Damocles? This is the story of the king who has a sword that is hanging from a thread over their throne as a reminder of how precarious their situation is.
Okay.
How precarious it is to be the king. How quickly it can end. This is one of those cases where at some point, the subpath pattern is a feature that is supported by Node, which means that eventually we will take a dependent. Eventually, somebody is either going to be making a V2 snap or an Agoric chain contract, and they're going to need to take a dependency on a package from somewhere in the NPM ecosystem that has decided to mark all of its exports explicitly using subpath patterns. And that package will be unusable to us without a patch.
Okay.
There are always workarounds, but this is basically like this is needed for feature parity with the ecosystem and is a speed bump for our developer experience anytime somebody encounters a package that uses the feature.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, good to know.
To provide a better case, I believe that there is a DApp at Agoric that is using a Cosmic Proto package, and currently the Cosmic Proto package has a generated subpath exports in its package JSON, but we've had to explicate specific paths in order to work around Endo's lack of this feature, which was difficult to communicate and frustrating to the developers. But there is a well-known workaround for the issue. If we had support for subpath patterns, we could remove the workaround, which would make it nicer and more maintainable.
Okay. Thank you for that background. Now your most recent comment mentioned a potential big refactor of how map node modules communicates inter-package linkage. So I'm definitely interested in diving in to this issue. But I guess my question is, does that fall in? So is that something I should be, aware of, or would that fall under the scope of this?
For sure.
Okay.
And that will require some design work. And you, I don't know how you work. This is a pretty hard feature, but like the I think that it would be good to like propose a design early so that I can provide feedback on a design. You might have to explore ahead to figure out what the design needs to be. Because I haven't figured out what the design needs to be. That's the work for this change for the most part, is figuring out how to actually implement this. Um, I think, but just mulling on it, it might not be a very big refactor. It might not be big, but it would be interesting. The as usual, with this layer of our system, like the thinking about what to do takes a lot longer than the doing, and the changes usually end up being small. The um the the problem for subpath patterns, um so map node modules is the subroutine in the compartment mapper that's responsible for exploring the file system and finding all of the package JSONs for all of the transitive dependencies of your entry point package, right?
Okay.
And do you know how Node does this? Like the rule, the
Um,
like the contract between Node and NPM.
how it figures out where like where the package exists.
Mhm.
Um, not off the top. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually this is really simple actually. The It has like horrible ramifications, but the rule is simple. That if you're in a package and and in any of from the common JS side, if you say require dot slash or dot dot slash, that's going to be the module specifier is interpreted as package local, and it just uses ordinary relative path join to find the dependency module. If it doesn't start with dot or dot dot slash, um, then the rule is that uh, it looks for a directory named node underscore modules slash uh,
package name.
either the package name or at organization slash package name. Like if it has an at symbol, then it goes two deep. If it doesn't, it only goes one deep. And then it looks for that in your current directory, and then the parent directory, and then the parent directory, then the parent directory until it finds one or doesn't, right?
Okay.
And
Oh,
if it doesn't find it anywhere, then it looks for a host built-in module with the same name.
okay. So it keeps going. All right.
Yeah.
Uh,
So what map node modules is doing is instead of doing what CommonJS does, it does something more like what ESM does, and it uses the ESM strategy, regardless of whether you're using CommonJS or ESM, which has some limitations in fidelity, but we don't need to go into that. But basically, what map node modules does is it says it does all of the work up front to discover all of the dependencies you could possibly intend to import. Right? So without actually looking at any of the individual modules, it says if I'm in this package, these are all of the names based off of the package JSON, what's in my dependencies map or my dev dependencies map. What are all of the things that you might need to resolve? What are all of the module specifier prefixes that you might need to resolve? And then it builds a table, a graph that says, if I'm in this package and you ask for this, here is the physical location of that package, right? And
okay.
that's like step one. That gives you the ability to say import X in one package if that package has X as one of its dev dependencies or dependencies. But the thing that's different than Node is that it must be mentioned, even for CommonJS, in the package JSON. And I think that I consider this a feature because it makes it so that you can discover a missing dependency while developing instead of waiting until you've published it and waited for NPM to install it in a physical location that might not be where it was when you were developing. Because NPM has a lot of liberty. As long as NPM can put your package anywhere it damn pleases, as long as it can be found by walking parent directories until you find a node underscore modules. Oh, and then the other thing that happens is that when it does find a package JSON, it uses the real path. It uses the physical location of the file, not the having followed all symbolic links. That's the actual location of the module for the purposes of the memo, for memoizing the module. So that's another thing to take into account. It's possible for the node modules walk to have a symbolic link in it that puts you in a completely different directory tree, so that when you walk up from there, you see an entirely different dependency for the same name. Right? So if you're if you're in one package and you say import X, it's going to walk up until it finds X. And then that might be a symbolic link to a completely different directory tree. So when you're in X and say import Y, you get a completely different instance of Y than you would have if you walked up and found Y in the original package. These are all of the things that are accounted for by map node modules. Map node modules only finds every package JSON that might be reached by something that's imported if you were to start importing things, but it doesn't actually load any modules at all. And it mustn't. And this is the work that's necessary that you have to do up front if you want to expose something like import meta resolve. If you've done all of this work, import meta resolve can be a synchronous function call. And you'll note that on the web and in Node, import meta resolve is synchronous now. And the reason they're able to do that is because they've done this work up front, and they don't have to explore the file system at all in order to answer questions about what import resolve should go to. All right, so that's the first thing. Now, in the current implementation, this doesn't take into account yet the imports and exports. This is just like what is the top level index for all of these packages. If you have an exports and imports directive, that means that if you are in a dependent module and there's a dependency module, and the dependency module has an exports declaration in its package JSON, that means that if I name you X, if I say I have a dependency on X and it goes over to package X, whatever, it's often the same name, but it isn't always the same name. You can say in my package, I can alias X to Y, even though it's X over there. So what map node modules is doing is it's saying if I'm a dependent package and you're a dependency package, the dependent package is going to use its name for the dependency instead of the dependency's own name for itself. And it's going to use that as a prefix for everything that the dependency module exports. So if the dependency says I export foobar and baz, and it's named Y, and I have a dependency on it as X, I'm going to introduce into my internal namespace X/foo, X/bar, and X/baz. And I can do that without looking at any of the, I do that as part of the mapping process instead of looking at the file system, because it was made explicit in the package JSON instead of by implication on the file system. And so I have to do that for every dependency. So for every package that depends on a dependency, the dependent package replicates a copy of its exports namespace and onto its internal imports namespace. And it has to be a copy because they are not all necessarily the same. Like one dependency can say x slash foo, x slash var, x slash baz, and then another one can say y slash bar slash y slash baz, y slash, etc. And that is the current system. It grafts every module for all of its dependencies, grafts each dependency's exports tree into its imports tree.
Okay.
And those are internal namespace and external namespace in the mapper. Now, that is the thing that probably has to change to accommodate subpaths or wildcard patterns in general. Because at the moment, it's just, these are constant strings. If you import this, you get that. If you import this, go over to that compartment and you get this. If you use this, import from that compartment and get that. And now it has to be, instead of being a simple lookup table, it needs to be a walk through a list of pattern matches until it finds a matching pattern and then rewrites that to the module specifier to use in the foreign compartment. And
Okay.
so the mechanism for communicating the pattern list has to be different than a simple map. It has to be like an array of patterns instead of a map from key to value.
Okay.
And furthermore, that list of patterns has to be JSON serializable because that is the communication path from map node modules to the linker is intended to be a JSON serializable structure.
Okay. So I'm going to have this is a lot of good information. I'm definitely going to have a lot of questions. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's worth, because I was going to just out of curiosity ask about the serialization format. Yeah, so
We
'cause
have
it seems
I have time to answer that question.
okay, yeah.
And Chris, I'm sure has his ears burning because we've talked about this recently. Bone Skull over is we've been talking about this feature recently. If you look in the compartment mapper under source types compartment map.ts, there is a TypeScript description of the serialization format for compartment maps in general. It is not great.
Okay.
The reason it is not great is because it is a generalization of two kinds of compartment map. One kind of compartment map is the kind that and they're supposed to not, both of these, there are two more specific compartment map schemas that both satisfy the current definition. But we really ought to have more specific types for those two types, like the compartment map. The compartment map that's generated by map node modules uses a different subset of the compartment map schema than the compartment map.json file that gets added to an archive. Because just by differences of the level of completeness and what is captured in them. The compartment map that ends up in an archive must not have this patterns array that we're talking about. And the compartment map that is generated for the purposes of map node modules really must produce this array, a pattern array. That's the state of things. Maybe it doesn't need to be an array. It might simply be the patterns as an object where all of the wildcards are expressed in strings, and then it's up to the runtime to compile that into a pattern matching table. That would be fine. I imagine that's necessary, actually. I imagine it is necessary for the import machinery to compile the patterns.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to need I mean, we need to do a lot of different investigating, but I'm curious to see the maps that are being built and the different yeah, artifacts, using the term correctly, being created at yeah, different steps in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's also something that will make Chris's ears burn because he's been adding a facility for logging the behavior of map node modules. Chris, did we land that? Did we land the log utility?
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, it's just a log option.
Yeah, so there'll be, yeah, so map node modules now is a log option that you can use to see. I haven't tried it yet. I look forward to your feedback.
Yeah, I'm believe it or not, I'm looking forward to diving in.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I also would I imagine if I were in your shoes, I'd be scared. But
I have a good, you know,
I am not good at diving into a mature code base and figuring it out. So if I expect questions.
yeah, I'm gonna use you all as my strength, you know, to
Very good.
keep
All
from
right.
being next question.
All right. I think that's the time we have for this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good week.